Every neighborhood has that one guy who takes the TEPO far too seriously. You know the type, strutting down the street like he's on patrol, clipboard under one arm, and his phone out like a weapon, ready to snap pictures of violations. For us, that man was Victor Crane. The strange part was, Victor wasn't elected, he wasn't appointed, he wasn't even asked. He simply decided one day that he was the TEPO patrol officer, judge, and jury, all rolled into one. And last week, he crossed a line my grandfather, Mr. Harris, was never going to let slide. It started one morning at 5:30 a.m. The wooden fence behind our yard creaked as I poured cereal into a bowl. I was still half asleep, but my grandfather was already on the porch in his rocking chair, watching. Without turning his head, he muttered, "There he goes again." I went to the window, and sure enough, there was Victor Crane, climbing over our fence like a burglar. His phone was out, snapping pictures of my grandfather's tomato plants. That's right, according to Victor, a 75-year-old veteran growing tomatoes in his backyard was apparently a crime against community aesthetics. I felt my blood boiling. I wanted to storm outside, but my grandfather lifted his hand, calm as ever, and said, "Patience. Let a fool run long enough, and he'll write his own ending." That was his way, calm, calculated, always thinking 3 steps ahead. The exact opposite of Victor's manic energy. This wasn't the first time we caught him trespassing. Twice before, he had snooped around our shed, once even rattling the door handle like he expected to find something illegal inside. Grandpa had complained to the TEPO president, Marcia Blake, but she only brushed it off with that plastic politician smile of hers. "Victor's just enthusiastic," she said. "He really cares about the neighborhood." Enthusiastic? He was breaking state trespassing law, but the TEPO hid behind technicalities, claiming it was just internal enforcement. Even the sheriff's office said unless we caught Victor in the act and pressed charges immediately, it would be our word against his. That was when Grandpa quietly hatched his plan. For 3 straight days, the garage became his workshop. He hummed old country tunes while I fetched tools, and sparks flew from the wiring he was setting up. By the 4th day, our wrought iron gate had a brand new modification: low-voltage electrical wiring. Perfectly legal under the state code as long as it was clearly posted. And Grandpa made sure it was. On the gate, in bold yellow letters, was a sign that read, "High voltage warning. Electrified gate, trespassers will be shocked." Right on cue, the next morning, Victor returned. Grandpa sat sipping his black coffee while I crouched behind the window, my heart pounding. Victor climbed the fence, muttering to himself about violations, and reached out. The moment his gloved hand touched the gate, snap! A jolt of electricity sent him stumbling backward, arms flailing. He yelped like a startled dog, landed hard in the dirt, then scrambled away limping. Grandpa didn't even flinch. He just leaned back in his chair, eyes glinting, and said softly, "That was the sound of justice." By noon, the entire street was buzzing. Neighbors whispered in driveways, stifling laughter, as Victor limped down Maple Court. Everyone had seen his antics before, measuring grass with a ruler, snooping in yards, even peeking through curtains at night. He was a menace, and for once, he had gotten a taste of his own medicine. But Victor wasn't about to take the humiliation quietly. By that afternoon, TEPO President Marcia Blake had called an emergency meeting. The room was tense the moment we walked in. Marcia sat at the head of the table, pearls around her neck and her fake smile in place. Victor sat to her right, his arm in a sling for dramatic effect. He jabbed a finger toward Grandpa and declared, "This man is endangering the neighborhood. He's built an electrified weapon. That gate nearly killed me." Grandpa didn't react. Calmly, he placed a folded paper on the table. "That," he said, "is a permit issued under the state electrical code. Fully legal, signed and registered, and I posted the required warning notice." Marcia tried to push back, insisting the TEPO had the right to regulate installations. But Grandpa's voice dropped into that commanding, gravelly tone that silences a room. "Regulate? Sure. Trespass? No. State law makes it a crime to enter private property without consent. Victor has done it 3 times. I'm done warning him. Next time, I'll press charges." The shift in the room was immediate. Neighbors who had stayed quiet suddenly spoke up. One woman admitted Victor had come into her backyard to measure her shrubs. Another said he had photographed her children's bikes and called them an eyesore. The tide turned against him. Marcia banged the gavel, trying to regain control, but Grandpa cut her off. "No, ma'am. We're here to discuss Victor's obsession. You let him run wild like he owns the neighborhood. And now he's learned what happens when you trespass on the wrong porch." Victor's face burned red with humiliation. For 2 days after that, he circled the block in his dented pickup truck, slowing in front of our house like a predator waiting for his chance. Grandpa barely acknowledged him, sitting calmly on the porch with his thermos of coffee, eyes steady as ever. But on the third night, Victor finally snapped. It was just past midnight when I woke to the sound of rustling at the gate. Peeking through the blinds, I saw Victor crouched there, flashlight in one hand, bolt cutters in the other. He muttered curses, preparing to break through. Grandpa was already waiting, rocking slowly in his chair. He pulled a small remote from his pocket, glanced at me, and whispered, "Watch this, kid." The moment Victor clamped the cutters onto the steel, Grandpa clicked the remote. A low hum surged through the wires, and Victor jolted violently. He yelped, dropped the cutters, and fell back into the mud, flailing. Grandpa didn't even rise. He sipped his coffee and muttered, "Trespassing. Again." Then he calmly lifted his phone, recording everything. Every stumble, every curse, every slip in the mud, in perfect high-definition video. But Victor wasn't finished. Gasping, covered in mud, he pulled out his own phone and screamed into it. 911. Attempted murder. This lunatic is trying to kill me with an illegal fence. Within minutes, red and blue lights flashed across our yard. Officers approached cautiously, hands on their holsters, glancing between muddy, trembling Victor and Grandpa, who sat calmly on the porch as though it were any other night. One officer asked, "Sir, is there an active electrical device on that gate?" Grandpa nodded evenly. "Yes. Registered, permitted, posted with warnings, and recorded. Here's the paperwork." He handed over the laminated permit and then his phone, still recording Victor's failed break-in. The officers watched the footage of him climbing, cutting, and frying himself on the wires. One officer looked up, deadpan. "So, you trespassed?" Victor sputtered, "No, I was conducting an inspection for the TEPO." The other officer raised a brow. "At midnight? With bolt cutters?" The law was crystal clear. Victor was guilty of criminal trespassing, vandalism, attempted theft, and filing a false police report. The officers cuffed him on the spot. Neighbors had gathered outside, drawn by the flashing lights. This time, they weren't whispering, they were clapping. For once, Victor Crane's self-appointed reign of terror had ended. Grandpa leaned back in his chair, nodded toward me, and said quietly, "Sometimes, son, justice just needs a little electricity." Victor sat in the back of the cruiser, drenched in sweat, his reputation in tatters, his imaginary TEPO badge confiscated. The gate he thought he could break became the very thing that broke him. Because when you mess with a man like my grandfather, you don't just lose the fight. You light the fuse that brings your whole empire crashing down.